we're going to do something a little different today. The senator's a guest of ours, and we always start our meetings with a pledge to flag because I think it's important. And so if everybody would join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That said, thank you very much. As I said, the senator's a guest of the city of Prescott. He's here to discuss what you want to discuss. And sometimes we disagree on things, but we always agree that we will show respect to the City Hall and the things that we talk about. So with that said, thanks for being here. Senator, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you all for being here on a Friday before a long weekend, and I appreciate everybody taking their time. And I hesitate to mention that this also happens to be my birthday. You know, when you get to where I am, I'm reminded the words of Casey Stengel, who once said, if I'd have known I was going to live this long, I'd have taken better care of myself. That old line. So, but very frankly, there's nothing that I'd rather do on my birthday, frankly, than have a chance to, again, be with the people that I represent, and particularly Prescott. But I also understand why a lot of people had other things to do on a Friday before the long weekend. I'd just like to mention several issues with you, and one of them, of course, is my respect and appreciation for the mayor and the great job that he and his staff do. He's getting a little old and a little forgetful, but in fact, I heard that he's hiding his own Easter eggs, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. But Prescott is a wonderful place and a wonderful place to live and raise your family, and the history behind it, we all know so well, is wonderful. So I just want to mention several issues with you and just pick up on a conversation that the mayor and I just had. And it's not that exciting given all the things that are happening in the world, but I think it's vital to the future of our state, and that's fire and water. Fire and water. 20% of our national forests have been consumed by fire in the last 10 years. And you can do the math to figure out that something's got to change, otherwise we are in a terrible situation for our state. Recently there was a NASA study that showed that the groundwater supplies in this state are much less than what we had originally predicted. There are already predictions from the Bureau of Reclamation that the Verde River could go dry at a certain period. It depends. None of these things are immutable. This is the reason why I want to talk to you about it, is because we can take steps to prevent these things from happening. But the path that we're on, with a 14-year drought, and the path that we're on would lead us to a severe crisis. Maybe not for us, my friend, maybe not for most people in this room, but for our children and our grandchildren. I think we have an obligation to them to try to give to them the same opportunity and lifestyle that has been so wonderful for all of us. And so on the issue of fire, about 2.4 million acres in Arizona needs to be thinned. And there's a program called 4Fry, and we can do it over the next 20 years. So far, though, the bad news is that only 15,000 acres have been thinned. And one of the problems, it can only be done through commercial enterprises. There's not enough tax dollars to thin the forest at taxpayers' expense. So we have these companies that will come in and they'll thin the forest and for commercial purposes, make pulp, sell the wood, etc. But that land has to be released for thinning by the Forest Service. And I'm not trying to bore you, but one of the biggest problems we have right now is the slowness of the Forest Service releasing this land. There's an enterprise in Cholo that was doing this work, which has recently had to lay off all of its employees because the land was not released for thinning. Now, that's just crazy when you think about it, particularly when you know that this, when you don't thin the forest, the fuel, the dead wood builds up, and the fire then destroys the trees. Back in the old days, when the forest was naturally thin, the fire would sweep through and leave trees standing without being burned. So that's the purpose of thinning. And by the way, I'm not going to bore you too long on this, but we're also going to have to start setting some priorities. And that is around the most populated areas, and that would obviously residential areas that would probably have to be of the highest priority. So we're going to have a conversation. The mayor's going to go around to all the block watches in Prescott and have a conversation with them. We've got to have a conversation with the people of Arizona. There are things we can do, none of them pleasant. None of them pleasant, otherwise we would just keep doing what we are doing. But it ranges from everything from toilets that don't use water to replacing lawns with desert plants and trees to agriculture, motivating agriculture to use less water that is being consumed under certain types of agriculture. I've got a little bit of good news with you, and I'll move on to another subject in a minute, but a fascinating thing has happened. There's a beetle from Kazakhstan that was introduced in the upper Colorado. The salt cedar that lines the Colorado River is a huge water consumer. 1.4 million acres of water is consumed by the salt cedar along the Colorado River that comes down to Arizona, and then obviously, as you know, go all the way to Yuma and beyond. So this beetle, believe it or not, eats salt cedar. Actually, the larva of the beetle does. And I was recently up on the Grand Canyon, up at Lee's Ferry, and the salt cedar are dead along there. It's amazing. And that beetle is moving south, over the objections, by the way, of some of our environmental friends. But anyway, so what we need to do is have a program where we replace that salt cedar with native trees. The salt cedar was introduced, by the way, and is an invasive species in the 1920s as a way to hold soil together. So we need to replace that salt cedar with native trees and bushes, so that's just one of the things that we can do amongst many others. In other words, we've got to think outside the box as well. So I'll stop. There's a lot more to talk about. The defense bill. We were able to keep the A-10 down at Davis-Monthan. We were able to restore $82 million for Raytheon. I was out at Boeing in Mesa just the other day. Everybody wants Apache helicopters, but there has been some cutbacks due to sequestration, and sequestration has caused us, I believe, to impair our defense capabilities in a world which is clearly in turmoil, as we know. Now, just very briefly, and I know that some people are here to talk about it, as to what's going on in two places. One is Ukraine, and the other, of course, as you know, Syria, Iraq. I would imagine that every American has seen, by the way, in case you missed it, my dance that many of you may have seen. Yes, I've done embarrassing things in my life, but that dance is probably the most embarrassing that I have done, and I will never forgive Mr. Fox for making me do that. But anyway, so I'm sure that most of you saw this horrible thing that was done to an American citizen. There's now threats that they will do the same thing to another American citizen that ISIS has in their, holding hostage, and it's really awful. But it's also a situation where ISIS is slaughtering people wholesale. There was another video yesterday where they captured a base and they took all the soldiers out. You probably saw it. And they're just their underwear on, and apparently slaughtered all of them. This is horrible. This is the largest, richest, most powerful caliphate or base for terror in history. They got hundreds of millions of dollars from the Mosul Bank when they took the Mosul Bank. They got a whole lot of American equipment, tanks, MRAPs, Humvees, automatic weapons, when they took Mosul and that equipment there. And they have obviously made significant advances in Syria. They are on the Lebanese border, they're on the Turkish border, they're on the Jordanian border, and according to all of our intelligence people, not John McCain necessarily, but the Director of National Intelligence, the head of the CIA, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of the FBI have all said that over time these people pose a direct threat to the United States of America. The head of this outfit of ISIS is a guy by the name of Baghdadi. He's obviously a very capable individual. He was in our prison in Iraq for 4 years during the Iraq conflict. The day he left, he told the Americans, he said, "I'll see you in New York." Now, he wasn't kidding. He wasn't joking when he said that. And so, we are going to have to, in my view, defeat ISIS, not stop ISIS, but defeat them. I think that can be done without large American combat troops on the ground. In fact, I'm sure that we can, and we must, because the American people would not support a reintroduction of large numbers of American troops. But we can provide arms to the Kurds who are using old weapons to fight against ISIS. We can foster a reconciliation between the new government of Iraq and the Sunni, which are a major problem there. We can attack the bases of ISIS through air power, both in Syria and in Iraq. And we can, there's one more. We can make sure that the Iraqis have the kind of intelligence that they need as well. And then finally, I'd like to switch over to Ukraine. It's clearly that Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine and has done so. He took Crimea, which was part of, and all these things are a little bit complex, but he took Crimea, which was part of Ukraine, and now he started out by thinking that he could get enough separatist Russian-speaking people to basically separate from Ukraine. That didn't work. So then he started providing weapons to these separatists. That didn't work. Now we've seen the movement of troops and tanks and weapons across into Ukraine from Russia and all the way to the south. So that is a very serious violation of every international norm that we believe in and stand for. And the Ukrainians need weapons from us, and they need intelligence information, and they need, and I think we need to impose much more severe sanctions on Vladimir Putin. If he succeeds here, he'll be putting pressure on Moldova and the other Baltic countries. I think we have to understand that Vladimir Putin is what he is. He's an old KGB colonel that wants to restore the Russian Empire, and that Ukraine is an integral part. There's a lot of other things going on in the world that I'd be glad to discuss with you, but instead I'd like to now respond to any questions or comments or insults that you might have. First insult.
Hi, you never called me for coffee. You got my number last time, so I'm waiting.
Yes, sir.
It's funny, I did the White House, I did the solar stuff for that, and we developed out fuel for furnaces out of firewood, which has been outlawed by the EPA. We use over 2% of our fuel system is wood, where solar is less than 1% of 1%, which is impractical 90% of the time and costly. And I do agree that we need to do something with our wood, because I've been in forest fires and family evacuated, came down our backyard in California, Santa Barbara, and that whole. And of course, I worked with the Mujahideen back in the 80s, and I know they're all dead because the bad guys killed them. I get a kick because I got an aunt that escaped Ukraine, and I dealt with that Ukrainian police that couldn't even get pistols back in the 90s after the Iron Curtain wrestled it away. Now they're trying to build another curtain at them, but they're going to make it out of it, but they're definitely working on it. I think we need to look at also what our civilians here being condemned for being Second Amendment supporters. How many people are coming across the border legally or illegally? There are chemists and other manufacturers against us that are from the Taliban or the ISIS that are making firearms and other weapons in this country illegally, and how we're going to deal with that.
Good. Could I just ask you to elaborate a little bit on the forest issue?
The forest issue right now is that because of the EPA and all the, I guess you'd say I'm a tree hugger. I love to put that with the work. Tree huggers, of course, stopped an awful lot of forest work. People out of work and using material. Even the Hopi back in New Mexico couldn't burn their own wood, and then they had a forest fire. They had to import wood into their 1,000-year-old homes. We need to look at it as a fuel source and a commodity, and of course, a building material. And we don't need to expend too much money on solar, because I did the White House. It doesn't work well. I designed a lot of this stuff. Of course, that was global cooling back then. Forestry is a very important part of our system. We're not expanding, but we're not being allowed to with our policies.
Frankly, I agree with you. One of the reasons why this forest thinning was also delayed to some degree is because of the fight we have, or the argument that environmentalists are making about the diameter of the tree that can be harvested. In order for these people to make money, it has to be fairly decent diameter. And of course, the environmentalists are bringing suit that you can't take that. And that's just, to me, look, I also, like you, I'm a tree hugger, okay? But when we are going to lose all our trees because of obstacles like that, then it's...
When a terrorist can flick a pick and destroy millions of dollars worth and take millions of dollars and lives, homes, what is a terrorist going to do? He doesn't have to bring over a nuclear weapon, he can flip a pick.
And as you know, one of the reasons why they didn't want the thinning is because to protect the spotted owl. Well, when the fires sweep through, a lot of spotted owls can't fly that fast. So anyway, on the issue of the border, this influx of children on our border is something which is really an unacceptable situation, because it gives people who live close by the opportunity that others don't to come to our country and become part of our society. We need to change a law that was passed in 2008, and I'd be glad to elaborate on why with you, that was designed to prevent or impede human trafficking. And basically it said that any of the children who came outside of Mexico would then have access to all kinds of legal appeals and delays before they'd be sent back. If they come from Mexico or Canada, contiguous country, then they can be sent back immediately. The only thing that's going to stop this influx of children is if plane loads of children return to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And that means amending the law that was passed in 2008. But we could also expand our consulates there, expand our embassies, so that if someone has an argument for asylum because their lives are in danger, they could go to our embassy or our consulate, make the case for asylum, and have it decided there, not by showing up on our border. So the only thing that's going to dissuade these people from sending them is to have them sent back immediately. I'd like to point out one other aspect of this that is not really discussed a lot, and should be. How about what happens to these children on their way up? They're taken by these drug cartel coyotes that do horrible things. There are estimates that as many as 1/3 of the young girls are raped on the way up. That's not an acceptable situation. So when we talk about humanity and care about these children, my God, don't we care about what happens? They ride on the top of a train and fall off? We have to, in my view, amend that law. Second point I'd like to make very quickly is that we can secure our border. We can use the technology that was developed in Iraq, radars and drones and other capabilities where we can get 90% effective control of our border. The American people, and the people of Arizona, have become so cynical that I'm beginning to believe that we have to show them that we can have 90% effective control of our border before we do other things. But I am confident if we spent the money, we could use the technology that's been developed in order to do that, to get our border 90% effective control and 100% situational awareness. If you've ever been to Israel, you can see where they are able to surveil and control their border. Yes, sir.
Senator McCain, Dennis Duval, Veterans for Peace from Prescott here. Now, I have to say, most of what you say and talk about, I think you're speaking more for the defense contractors, specifically Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and thanks to you and the last 4 presidents, the United States has armed the Middle East to the teeth. That whole Middle East is bristling with American-made weapons, Soviet weapons. So why is it that that Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, they can't contain or stop a military threat like ISIS? Why are we over there again? I'm a veteran. I don't want to see our guys going over to Iraq again, not for the 3rd time. I have to say that it seems to me like you're not happy unless you're bombing somebody.
Well, I thank you for those comments, and I appreciate your point of view. I think that my viewpoint is that we are seeing, particularly in the Middle East, the rise of radical Islam, which is dedicated to destroying everything we believe in and stand for. And that, we proved in 9/11 that at least then, they have the capability of attacking the United States of America. There are now some thousands of foreign fighters that are in Syria and Iraq. There are several thousand who are Europeans who have European passports. And all they've got to do is go back and then get on an airplane and they can come to the United States of America, which they have openly said they're going to do. They're not keeping it a secret. They are saying, we want to destroy the United States of America. And they, well, about a month and a half ago, there was a young American who was fighting in Syria on the side of ISIS, flew back to the United States without us knowing about it, and then went back to Syria and became a suicide bomber. Now, we know of 3 Americans now who are fighting in Syria who have been killed in Syria. So I guess one of the differences in your viewpoint and mine, and I respect your view, is the nature of the threat that we face. And I do rely on our Director of National Intelligence, the head of the CIA, the Secretary of Homeland Security, who has said they are a direct threat to the United States. So again, I think you made some very good points from your point of view, but I just simply, we just have a disagreement, particularly in light that we've already been attacked once, back in 9/11, and they are dedicated to doing that. And anybody who underestimates their intelligence, I think, don't understand them or certainly don't have the same view of them that I do. But you are obviously an advocate for what you believe in. I can tell by your T-shirt, and I appreciate the fact that we can have this engagement because I think people are better informed by having this conversation. Yes, ma'am.
Senator McCain, being that America is a nation founded on Judeo-Christian principles and values, and President Obama is a chameleon paradox in that he has a traditional marriage but promotes homosexuality, which God abhors and considers to be an abomination. and our children look to our president as a role model and know there's confusion between the reproduction system and the excretory system, thus confusion of the fruit of the loom with fruit of the womb, and that our president orchestrated the destruction of the sovereignty of our nation by using thousands of little children, just like the Muslim Brotherhood, ISIS, and ISIL do. How can you possibly reach across the aisle, aid and abet, and cooperate with an agenda that transforms our precious nation, where we have the rule of law, the exercise of free will and rights of conscience, the free enterprise system, and the American dream for a totalitarian state, which is what a new world order and a one world government represents?
Well, thank you for your comments. I don't think there's any doubt that there are profound differences between myself and President Obama on a number of issues. But I also disagree with your characterization of President Obama in many areas which you did. Also, I think our system of government is based, as you say, on the rule of law, but it's also based on working for the people. And the best way that I can represent the people of Arizona is by doing what I can to help the people of Arizona lead better lives. And many times that requires reaching across the aisle to work with those of the other party. Now let me just give you the best example I can of recently, and that was the scandal at the VA in Phoenix. Now there were allegations that as many as 50 of our veterans died. Now those allegations may not be true, but there was just a scathing denunciation of the VA and the Inspector General's report in the last couple of days. And so we have this huge problem. I sat down with the only announced socialist senator in the United States Senate. Obviously, I am a well-known conservative, and I'm proud to be a conservative. But with very tough negotiations and very great differences, he and I came up with a bill to help provide our veterans with the health care that we owe them, and the vote was 93-3 in the United States Senate. We later, again, on a bipartisan basis, passed legislation which reached the President's desk, which he signed. Now, I may have my disagreements with President Obama, but there came a time, for the sake of our veterans, that I had to work across the aisle to help get them the health care that they have earned. If anybody has earned the benefits, it's those who have served in the military in time of war. So there are times, I will tell you, where I do fierce ideological battle with the President of the United States, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But there are times, such as when our veterans' lives are literally threatened, that I'll reach across the aisle and work with the other party to come up with a way to begin. By the way, this legislation is only the beginning. There are serious, severe systemic problems in the VA, but to begin to care for our veterans. So all I can say to you, I think my job in the United States Senate is to represent all of the people, and with certain priorities, and clearly our veterans are one of our highest priorities because they're the ones who have done the serving and sacrificing. Now thank you for your comments. Yes, sir.
I'd like to take a minute to say thanks to you and Tom McKenna, which is your right-hand man, for the care and the help he gave my dad to keep him in the nursing home at the VA, until he passed away. And finally, after all these years, to get my disability from the Agent Orange and post-traumatic stress disorder. And if it's possible, I'd like to shake your hand and have a friend of mine take a picture, because it'd be a great honor to me for everything that your people have done.
Make those decisions. So it's just that I believe in local government as the best government. I trust I trust their judgment, but I think it really, I agree with you. I think it needs to be examined as to whether these military equipment were acquired because of a need or because they were available, as you point out. So I think it's an issue that needs to be discussed. Please follow up.
If you're going to be looking and talking to the local governmental officials, which I think is a great idea, I think it's important also to get input from community members. Because I've witnessed events where I've seen families, parents pushing children in strollers that are facing a battery of militarized police officers who are an intimidating force for these families. And I think it's important to not only have input from elected officials, but it's important to have community input from the people who are going to be affected by these types of programs.
First of all, I totally agree with you. And after the Armed Services Committee reviews it, which I think will give me a little better knowledge and background of it, maybe we could send a letter to the mayors and city council members and the county supervisors saying, we believe that you really also need local input, which I hope that would be automatic even without me or others urging it. Thank you for bringing this issue. It is an issue of a lot of concern to a lot of people. Yes, sir.
I have 3 questions. One, you mentioned...
Let's take them one at a time.
Okay, the first one is you mentioned that ISIL is the best funded, and obviously they got a lot of money out of Mosul, but who else is funding them? Are the Wahhabi princes of Saudi Arabia doing that? Where is the rest of the funding coming from?
I heard that the money is coming from certain elements. Saudi Arabia is one of them, but Qatar is probably a much bigger one. And support groups from literally all over the world. Extortion, holding people hostage. That's one of their biggest sources. Is every country in the world but the United States just about will pay millions and millions of dollars for the release of people who are being held hostage. And extortion. There's one other one.
Oil.
Yeah, exactly. They're selling oil. Exactly. Thanks. They're selling oil on the black market, for which the Iranians are helping them sell. All of those are making them very wealthy. And as you mentioned, I think it was $400 million in the Mosul Bank, but that's a one-shot deal. These other enterprises that we're talking about are ongoing. Go ahead, second.
I'm reading Robert Gates' memoir, and I just wanted to read you something he said about the VA. He basically indicated that, find this here, he indicated that the greatest failure of his secretary, time secretary, was the inability to change things there. And my question is, why is it taking so long? It seems that he was writing this stuff at the end of the Bush administration and into the beginning of Obama. You get a 93-3 vote, so it's obviously a popular thing, but why is it taking so long? I mean, one of the things that bothers, I voted for Obama, but one of the things that bothers me is everything that's happening is reactive rather than proactive. Why do you think it took so long to identify this problem? And then the next question.
Could I just stop there? We have known of these problems. We have known of many of the problems, and we have asked for investigations. We have had hearings, and yet like a lot of other bureaucracies in Washington, it kind of just goes on and Band-Aids were more money. We have continuously increased our appropriations, even though the overall veterans population is going down. As you know, the World War II and Korean War, and now Vietnam War veterans are leaving. And by the way, they are more expensive because there's a lot of that, as you know, is geriatric care with our older veterans. But it's been, and we've complained about it, and we've asked for congressional hearings. It's like a lot of things. It required a catalyst. It required a scandal. But look, I guarantee you, on campaigns, there's going to be a scandal on all this outside money that's coming in, which nobody knows where it came from, that's coming into political campaigns. We know what's going on. There's going to be a scandal. And I bet you it's foreign money, but I wouldn't be too positive of it. So it required kind of a catalyst to make all this. Hey Mel, how you doing? I think it requires.
I thought the Walter Reed incident would have maybe been that catalyst.
I know. In my role in government, I can pass laws, I can debate, I can propose amendments, I can demand investigations, all of which that we did. But you got to get a response. By the way, Mr. Gates, he expresses his extreme frustration with Congress.
Oh, so much stuff he writes in here is coming true. You know, I mean, it's
one of the moments of my life. He was asked by Wolf Blitzer when the book first came out. He said, "Was there any members of Congress that you respected and worked with?" And he paused, and I paused, and he said, "McCain and Levin." For that. But he also pointed out a number of other issues, including the fact that the personnel costs are continuing to go up so dramatically that we're not going to be able to spend money on war fighting. And we're going to have to address that issue. And it's going to require some tough decisions. Third question.
I've always admired you for reaching across the aisle, but it just seems that now you have people who used to do that are just leaving, like Olympia Snow and people like her. It seems to me that there's an inertia. Are our days of reaching across the aisle over, basically, to get anything done?
Well, I hope not, because at some point, members of Congress are going to realize that we need to get things done so that we could gain the approval of the people we represent. The approval rating of Congress right now is 12%, in case you missed it. We're now, is anyone here in that 12% that approves of Congress? Please raise your hand. We're down to paid staff and blood relatives. And my mother is 102 years old. I'm not making that up. I received a call from her the other day. We're now down to paid staff. Let me just say that part of it has to do with redistricting and people being in lifetime seats, as you know. Part of it has to do with the constant the polarization of the media. You know, you can watch MSNBC and get one version, you can watch Fox and get another. The economic downturn was also something that angered people, gave rise to the Tea Party, or helped the Tea Party gain more prominence. But there is one thing that's happening here in Arizona that's interesting. You know, we now have seen a dramatic rise in independent voter registration. When I first ran, there was a very relatively small percent who were independent voters. Now it's basically one-third, one-third, one-third. And if a candidate is going to win a statewide election, that candidate is going to have to attract independent voters. That obviously, I think, has an effect of moving people to attract the independent voter as well. So all I can do is say that I hope that this polarization gets less. But the fact is that when we go back in September, and go out after a couple of weeks. This will be the least productive Congress in history. That's not something, frankly, I'm proud to come home and talk to the people in a town hall meeting about, to be honest with you. Thank you. Did you have a comment? Yes, sir.
First of all, happy birthday.
Thank you.
I don't want to get sidetracked because I'm here for a VA disability issue, but reference to Syria.
Could I just mention, you know we have an office here in Prescott, and I hope that...
I'm working hand in hand with Cheryl.
Okay,
You know,
good, good. Thank you.
They're God sakes, really hard. As far as Syria, I wrote you a letter a while back during the beginning of the Syrian uprising, and urging to support moderate forces to avoid what I saw in Bosnia when I was serving during the Bosnian War and the civilian war, the radicalization, because you got to stop that from the start. I urged you, and thank you for your reply. And we both agreed on the issue, but it didn't happen, and look what we got. We got ISIS, and when it could have been avoided from the beginning. I hate to be right, but I was. We were. As far as the rest of that, you got to stand up for bullies. Whether it be ISIS or you got to stand up for bullies, or you're going to be slaves. That's it.
Thank you, and I hope you and your friend on the left there would have a productive conversation about this issue. Yeah, see, I believe that you're exactly right. It was a seminal moment that Hillary Clinton just referred to in an interview that she did about 2 weeks ago. There was a time when the entire national security team of the President Obama, recommended that they arm and equip and train the Free Syrian Army. He turned that down. Hillary Clinton, in an interview 2 weeks ago, said that that was a serious mistake that they made because now it gave stronger, more influence to ISIS, it allowed Bashar Assad to continue the slaughter. My friends, there's 192,000 people that have been killed in Syria, most of them by Bashar Assad. There's now 3 million refugees out of Syria. This didn't have to happen, in my view, if we had armed and equipped and trained the Free Syrian Army. And initially they were winning. Remember, it was President Obama that said, it's not a matter of whether Bashar Assad will leave, it's a matter of when. Does anybody believe that now? I don't think so. So I thank you for your comment.
As far as VA, I'm a 50% disabled veteran, former airborne Marine, and my issue with the disability pension arm of the VA has been just nothing but a nightmare since the day I was discharged. And here is no different there. I know that things have been pushed to speed up the process of addressing complaints. Yeah, it's sped up. Speeding it up doesn't mean just decisions. All they've done is speed up the process of declining everybody. And I'm caught up in that. That's why I am. Tom knows it with my issue. I work hand in hand with Cheryl. And I can't commend them enough. But they're butt heads with the same system. And I've had issues of examiners manipulating things. And I knew you hate the word, I hate to use it too, out lying on reports to make it sure that I'm turned down. It's happened again. And it's an issue for 4.5 years now. And it's an issue that all disabled vets get. And once they're going to be discharged from service now, don't run into unless the source is, this whole process is changed. I don't know why people, normal people, would lie to destroy another person's life. But it's happening, and we should find out why this is happening. There's a reason. And I'm caught up in the middle of it.
Thank you. We'll continue to do everything we can to help, and I know those are harsh words of mine, but I'd just like to mention to you that when this whole thing started to break, Jeff Lake and I went over and had a meeting with the Phoenix VA, the heads and about 6 people who were running the Phoenix VA. And Jeff Lake and I were told to our face, there's no such thing as a waiting list. Now, that was a remarkable event. And by the way, 2 of the people who were in charge there are now on, quote, administrative leave. Full pay, full benefits. Full pay, full benefits. We put into this law, one of the reasons why I was proud of it, is that the head of the VA, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, can fire people. They immediately lose their pay and benefits. They have to appeal within 7 days, and their case has to be adjudicated within 30 days of that. No more of this, quote, administrative leave or shuffling people from one. What we're finding out is people would do a bad job in one VA and they would just shuffle them to another. And that's just not acceptable for our veterans. Yes, ma'am.
This isn't my comment, but one of the big elephants in the room, which nobody's talking about, is the unionization of those employees, which the Wall Street Journal addressed. And that's one of the problems because it's one of the biggest fundraisers for the Democratic Party. But my comment is, one of the things...
By the way, yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
That's a big problem. One of the things that I would really like to see the Republicans do is have more of a spine when it comes to these appointments. Because we have got Eric Holder, we have a terrible head of the EPA. We go right down all these appointments, and Republicans should be voting no, no, no. We're getting these, god-awful appointments, doing these terrible things to our country, and the Republicans need to stand up and say no. If that's not partisanship, fine. But I'm just really disgusted that there isn't more pushback on that.
First of all, I vote no all the time. A lot of us do. But the second point is, as you may know, and I don't want to get into arcane parliamentary stuff, but Harry Reid and the Democrats, with a majority vote, we're not supposed to be able to change the rules of the Senate except with 60 votes, changed it with 51 votes, so now our votes don't matter. I mean, we vote no all the time, but because they blew up the United States Senate, then no longer, because they have 55, and all they need is 51. But that is really, in my view, it's the worst thing that's happened to the United States Senate in its history, because it deprives anyone in the minority of their right for advice and consent. And that's outlined in the Constitution of the United States as an obligation and a right reserved for the United States Senate. So I promise you I am frustrated more than I can tell you. I just want to say again, I thank you all for coming. I know that it's a hard thing to ask just on a Labor Day weekend, but I do thank you. I love to come to Prescott. I was just reminiscing with the mayor all the way back to Barry Goldwater in 1952, the night before his election. He was here in Prescott, and we've carried on that tradition ever since. There's nothing quite as moving to me as being there on the steps of the courthouse in front of my favorite statue of Bucky O'Neill, my favorite statue in all the world, and my role model, Bucky O'Neill. So, anyway, so I thank you all for coming, and I look forward to hearing from you. And so, thanks again. All right. How you doing? Good to see you again.